Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Export Skills Program webinar. And today's webinar being the very last one in our Export Skills Program for 2022. It's been a fair marathon. We've got through 32 individual sessions to date. And it's great to see so many of you online today who have been with us from the beginning of the sessions and have stayed with us throughout. It's always really great when you know you've got a core group of people following through. I'm Collins Rex. I'm a director of the Global Trade Professionals Alliance, and the GTPA is an organisation that cultivates international standards within the industry. Our aim is to create a trade environment that is both inclusive and trusted by all. And the GTPA has partnered with Global Victoria and Agriculture Victoria's Pathways to Export program to deliver the comprehensive export skills program. And as I mentioned, today is the last session. The address you see on the screen will take you to the registration page, but there in time you will also be able to find recordings of the sessions and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So feel free to bookmark that page nevertheless. Global Victoria and the GTPA have partnered with Pathways to Export to deliver this module, which is the International Business Rules module. And if you go along to the URL on your screen, you'll find all the information you could possibly want about the Pathways to Export program. And you will see there that it is a $5 million 4-year program. It creates pathways for Victorian agri-food businesses as they internationalise and diversify into new markets. It also provides tailored one-on-one support to new exporters. It complements Global Victoria's programs, events and missions, and the program has funded the Vic House Food and Fibre Pavilion. It covers emerging categories, citing strong global growth, and it has in-market specialists in a network around 23 global offices, and it provides practical services for new exporters, including checklists, webinars, and the like. I also just draw your attention to the disclaimer on the screen, and please bear in mind that all information is of a general nature, and today's webinar, as always, is being recorded. So as I mentioned, I'm Collins Rex, and I'll be your primary presenter for today. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our first speaker. But before we get there, I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, which for me is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Straits Islanders peoples who may be joining us on today's webinar. So today we are going to do a quick throt to doing business in MENA, and of course a lot of ground to cover, so strap in folks, it's going to be a wild ride. I am delighted though today to start us off. I'm joined by Kassem Yunus, who's a General Manager for the Middle East, Africa and Turkey with the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office. And I'm going to pass the floor, virtual and otherwise, to you, Kassem.
Thank you, Collins. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for those who are connected from Dubai office. So as Collins said, I'm the General Manager for the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office. I'm based in Dubai. And next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of background, the Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office was set up in Dubai in 1997. That was 1 year after Emirates Airlines started flying to Melbourne back in 1996. The office has been based in Dubai since then, and this year was an exception year where we celebrate our 25th anniversary of having the office in the region here. And we had the pleasure to have the Governor of Victoria visiting the region during Expo to celebrate this event. We have about 5 people here in the office in Dubai and 1 person in Kenya. So for those who are connected first time to the Middle East and Africa region, and you would like to, take it forward and talk to the team, I would really encourage you to talk to Emma Page for any food and fiber discussion. Lamia Damerji is our Regional Business Development Manager who looks after beauty, cosmetic, healthcare, and sports management, sports tech. In addition to the mining equipment technology services, Baris Sattar is our Director for Education Services. For anything related to international education, vocational training, as well as EduTech, please talk to Barish. Mireia is our office manager. She's on leave at the moment, but she looks after the admin in the office. In addition, we have Madeline Sexton. She's our acting manager for South Asia, Middle East, and Africa, based in Melbourne. And also we have Atal Samad, who joined the team recently for 6 months. Atal, he's a regional specialist for the region, based also in Melbourne, to help Madeline in that perspective. Next slide, please. So for those who are first time connected to the Middle East region, let me give you a bit of perspective about the region. So when we say MEA, that's mean Middle East and Africa region. When we talk about MENA, that's mean MENA, it's Middle East and North Africa. Now, what's the difference between them? The office looks after 79 countries. Doesn't mean that we do business in every country of those in those regions. Now, and when it comes to the Gulf region, which is the 6 states that the all rich countries, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain, in addition to Oman, those are the main focus across many sectors. When we talk about North Africa, we talk about Egypt and Morocco for where are the opportunities for Victoria. And when we talk about Africa, Sub-Sahara, we talk about Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. And there's also, we focus mainly on mining equipment, technology services, and education. In addition, we cover Turkey, and there's a lot of opportunities in Turkey, especially in the education sector. Other sectors, it depends on the category of the products and services. There's a lot of opportunities, but also there's some challenges in entering that market. Now, we also cover Russia, CIS, and Ukraine countries, but due to the recent conflict between Russia and Ukraine, at the moment, we are not doing much there. But we are servicing the Kazakhstan and the Commonwealth independent states on opportunities basis. For those, again, who are connected first time, so when we talk about the Middle East and Africa region, we talk about 1.1 billion population. That's the Africa Sub-Sahara itself, plus 578 million, which is the Middle East and North Africa. When we talk about the Gulf region, we talk about 1.4 trillion of GDP, which is consists of the 6 states. Saudi Arabia by itself is 50% of the Gulf region GDP. Now, how strong is the Victorian export to this region? At the moment, we are exporting around $1.3 billion worth of merchandise products into the Middle East and Africa region. Predominantly is food and fiber, around $1.1 billion, and plus I think the second largest merchandise products outside the food and fiber is the vehicle parts and accessories, and plus in addition to the perfumery and cosmetics. Now, doesn't count the services that we provide in this region, whether it's education services or mining equipment technology services, or any other professional services. Like we have a lot of companies from Victoria have presence here in the Gulf region. They provide sustainability and livability services, like companies like JHD, like Oricon. They are one of the largest engineering consultant companies from Victoria or Australia who are doing a lot of business in this part of the world. We have a lot of also architect designers who are delivering projects in these countries as well. So next slide, please. So the region, despite the impact of COVID, I mean, the past 2.5 years was really challenging for the region, not only for the region, but also on a global stage. Despite all these challenges, the region presents a strong opportunities for Victorian businesses, whether you are in fiber and food technology, food and fiber, or maybe in sports management or professional services or digital health. So traditionally, there's a lot of opportunities in the food and fiber. 90% of the food are imported. 90% of the food bills for this region are imported, and from any countries like from Australia, from South Africa, or Latin America, or Europe. Hence, there's opportunities for the food and fiber, and the main focus would be in the Gulf region. The reason behind it is we talk about rich countries. There's a big trend on health and organic food products. Predominantly, they're looking for premium and quality products, and where Australia can fit in that category, especially Victoria as well. So Victoria exports around 30% of Australia's food and fiber to the MENA region. So we are well established here. There's a lot of opportunities in the retail and as well in the food service. And one of the reasons behind this one and driving the opportunities in the food and fiber is that it's the Gulf region and in general the Middle East and North Africa is very young and fast growing population. We talk about 70% of the population are below 30 years old, and it's also one of the large the highest growth of growing population in the world. Is an average of 1.56%. This is well above the global rate of 1.1% population growth. Now, the past 2.5 years, as I said, there was been challenging for the whole world and also for this region. Hence, we have seen an acceleration opportunities in the digital health, e-commerce, as well in sports tech and anything related to tech sectors. So, Victorian business who have capability and capacity in these sectors, there's also we would like to talk to you about this opportunity in this region. Next slide, please. As I said, the landscape of business internationally is changing, and we have seen the same here in this part of the world. And I'm going to talk a bit about Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is, 50% of the Gulf region GDP, has the highest number of population. We talk about 35 million population. Traditionally, they were relying on oil and gas to grow their economy. Hence, the past 3 years, the government has changed their and transformed their economy, and they're trying to get away from the oil and gas focus. And now they have two major new pillars that's going to support the economy. One is hospitality and tourism. The second one is mining sector. Talk about mining sector is it's considered they have around 1.3 trillion of reserve minerals and critical minerals in Saudi Arabia. And when we talk about tourism and hospitality, Saudi Arabia is building 4 giga projects. Those 4 giga projects will be built from scratch, where they're going to build airports, residential, commercial, hospitality, hotels. Also they are looking to engage with international universities to build campuses for university and accommodate, their population in those cities. An example is like NEOM. It's a long-term project. It's part of their 2030 Saudi 2030 vision. Also, there's another project called Red Sea Development. They're talking about 80 plus hotel and resorts will be built offshore, where there's opportunities for food and fiber, opportunities for professional services, architect designers to be engaged in those projects. So when we come to the food and fiber, there's an ongoing opportunity. In addition to that, the region and especially Saudi Arabia are trying to raise the profile internationally. Hence, they are bidding for international major events such as Expo 2030. They have a big chance to win that by then. As you know, this year, Dubai hosted Expo 2020. However, it was delivered in 2021, 2022. The same Saudi Arabia is hosting Asian Games in 2034. Hence, we are seeing a lot of these countries in the region are bidding for international events to raise their profile internationally. Also, Qatar is hosting the FIFA World Cup in November this year. What we have seen also emerging in this part of the world is the e-commerce retail for both retail and food products. The region before COVID, the e-commerce in this region before COVID was about only maybe around 3% of the total retail sector. However, now it has reached about 11%. So we have seen significant growth in the e-commerce sector, and for some categories has raised by 300%. So companies who have beauty, cosmetics, and wellness products can talk to the team here in Dubai to see how it can access the market. It's a bit different than any other markets. You can't sell directly to the e-commerce platforms. You have to have a distributor in market, whether it's food or beauty and cosmetic, hence because the products need to be registered by the relevant authority. Of course, the sports technology is also accelerating in this part of the world. Saudi Arabia is building, for example, a city the size of Las Vegas, where they're going to host all the major sports events. Hence, there's opportunities for sports tech, sports management, and also for universities to be engaged in those projects. Next slide, please. As I said, education is also a priority sector for this market. Now, it's not only about recruiting students from this region to enroll in universities in higher education, whether undergraduate or postgraduate, but also is about delivering, tailored programs or tailored degrees, or maybe joint degrees in the market. Hence, we have, Melbourne, Monash University, Deakin, Swinburne, RMIT, and many others are engaged in this part of the world. We also have seen vocational training is in the big demand, especially in Saudi and Egypt, as well in Kenya and Nigeria, whether it's for hospitality and tourism, and also in the mining sector. EdTech has been also in big demand recently due to the pandemic, whether we're talking about Africa or the Gulf region. So we're more than happy to talk in one-on-one offline about those opportunities. This year we have signed, mRNA Victoria have signed an MOU with the Department of Health in Abu Dhabi. That was during the Expo 2020. And we believe under the umbrella of that MOU, there's a lot of opportunities for, joint research collaboration between whether mRNA Victoria or the healthcare, precincts on the healthcare stakeholders in Victoria to engage with the relevant authorities and also relevant research centers here in the UAE. Saudi Arabia also recently has announced they are interested into joint collaboration in the healthcare as well. So we're more than happy to talk to you about these opportunities offline. Next slide, please. Now, this region, like any other region, it requires, to be follow-up is really important. Yes, at the moment we are well connected online with all this technology and platforms, but the region, to do business in this region requires you to travel frequently and meet your potential business partners, in face-to-face or in person. They appreciate that you are traveling to meet them in person, and also you maybe, whether it depends on your business, we can invite them down to Melbourne to overview your assets or maybe your operations, and then we can take it from there. Now, as I said, the landscape has changed in the past 2.5 years, but still is a face-to-face market, this one. Whether you are, having products or services that requires to register on, with the relevant authority to enter the market, be aware of hidden costs. There's a lot of hidden costs which is not mentioned, in any documents or contracts. Whether it's related to travel costs, it's not cheap anymore. Whether it's related to labeling costs or maybe non-tariff barriers. So we have seen non-tariff barriers has increased in this part of the world, where requires from Victorian business to do their due diligence and also to do extra, homework to enter this market. And we're more than happy to support you to enter this market. Having an exit strategy is very important. Whether you have signed a contract or a commercial agreement with any business partner in this part of the world, it's very important to have an exit strategy. Next slide, please. The challenge that we're facing at the moment, it's a global challenge, not only for this region, but what has recently put an extra, challenge for our businesses is the supply chain issues, is the conflict that between Russia and Ukraine has raised the food security issues worldwide, as well as the demand for, products and services. So the supply, unfortunately, supply chain is a big challenge at the moment for food and fiber. We have seen the raise of the cost of freight, whether it's sea freight or air freight, and we're not seeing this one will normalize before the next year, 2023, and some of the reports saying that's going to be much longer than that. So I really encourage you to check all the costs and the freight and discuss it with your potential partner before you exclude any business here. This region is very diverse, as I said earlier. It's very diverse, and sanctions, security, and bilateral issues is a big challenge here. So the landscape might change at any stage. Like we said, Russia, for example, a lot of our mining equipment technology service companies, they've been dealing and doing business in Russia, but unfortunately, with the recent sanctions and the challenge and the conflict has halt their ability to do business in Russia anymore. So make sure that you are well discuss your risk management is very important for you, and to discuss it with your legal firms. Cash is very important. Whether it depends, doesn't matter whether you sign a deal or contract, you'll find that the cash flow is very slow in this part of the world. Next slide, please. Those who are traveling in the region, I would encourage you to look at those major events, whether Food and Fiber. Gulf Food is our major event in the region. Gulf Food is the largest annual food show. Saudi Food Show is no longer in March; it's going to be in May 2023. And the rest of those major events, I encourage you to engage or participate, or just, if you are stopping over, to visit them and see the opportunity and the potential for you in this market. Next slide, please. That's all for me today. If you have any questions, you can find my details in this presentation. Otherwise, please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, where you can, and the Global Victoria website, where you can see all the future and forthcoming trade, outbound and inbound trade missions that we are running next financial year. Thank you, Collins. Sorry for taking extra time.
Oh, no, there's a lot of important information to get through. Thanks very much, Kassem. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. Don't raise your hand because we're not going to unmute your microphone and let you speak. So type it in the chat box, and if it's relevant to the conversation at the time, we'll take it. If it's a fairly long question with a long answer, we'll probably keep it until the end or take it offline, considering that we do have a limited amount of time today. But thank you very much, Kassem. That was very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of pearls of wisdom for all of you to take from Kassem's presentation. And also, we will make available to you a copy of today's presentation. So if you'd like that, just drop me an email. I'll give you my address at the end, and then you'll have all the contact details for Kassem and his team as well. So let's look at a market snapshot, shall we, for MENA? Kassem has given you the basics already, but let's just cover some of the ground that is very important to get down pat in this region. So the Middle East, of course, first of all, it's an unofficial grouping of countries geographically located in the region, where Southeast Asia touches Africa to the west and Europe to the north. Now, there's no definitive roster of Middle Eastern countries. Most sources will choose a core group of between 15 and 16 countries, and that depends on whether you include Egypt in the Middle East or North Africa. The largest Middle Eastern country in terms of physical size is Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain is the Middle Eastern country with the smallest total area. The countries that make up the Middle East vary greatly in size in terms of culture, language, and geographic size. Arabs, Kurds, Turks, Azeris, Persians make up the majority, and then of course they're minority ethnic groups, and you can see them all there. The most prominent religions practiced in the Middle East are Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Mondaism, and several others, and then there are some smaller belief systems and practices, and those major religions have a major impact on the way in which things function in the region. The countries that are usually considered to be part of the Middle East, you can see the list there. And as I say, Egypt, often included in the Middle East, even though geographically it's more prone to be in North Africa. North Africa is a group of countries and territories that occupy the northerly region of the African continent, often defined as the part of Africa that stretches from the Atlantic shore in the west to the Red Sea coast and the Suez Canal in the east. But the variations are many when it comes to determining what constitutes North Africa. The countries that most commonly are considered to be in North Africa are, as you see them on the screen there. So when we combine those and we get to MENA, MENA is an acronym, of course, for Middle East and North Africa. The region is typically considered to include around 19 countries, can go up to 27. The World Bank gives us a list of 21 countries, and that according to their 2020 population reports. About 6% of the world's population lives in those 21 countries. According to OPEC, the MENA region produced around 55% of the world's oil reserves and 43% of the world's natural gas reserves in the past year. Just focusing on a few of the key economies, The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is by far the largest economy in the MENA region, gross domestic product of around $700 billion in 2022, and the country still is highly dependent on petroleum and natural gas, but it is trying to reduce its dependence on petroleum exports by diversifying into tech, tourism sectors, and others. The state of Israel has a GDP of 407 billion, and that was in 2020. It's the second largest economy in the MENA region, and it's not an exporter of energy, unlike most of its neighbors. Of course, difficult market, and a market that has ongoing conflicts, as much of the region does. Egypt, GDP of 365 million. It represents the largest economy in North Africa, as well as the third largest economy in the MENA region. And the United Arab Emirates has an open economy with a high per capita income and sizable annual trade surpluses. And it has very successfully managed to diversify its economy away from just oil and gas. And its strategic plan for the next few years definitely focuses on that economic diversification, which creates many opportunities for Victorian exporters. When we look at doing business in MENA, it is very important to understand the region. The region, if we consider it to be 21 countries, you can think for yourself that those 21 countries obviously each have their own way of doing things, their own laws, regulations, cultures, religions, etc. But there are great rewards for any businesses who are willing to go at it correctly and to actually stick with it, because it's not going to be a short-term strategy. And there is definitely no one business strategy in the region. Very important to note that every religious and cultural group in the region has its own rituals, its own holidays, its own characteristics. For Muslims, for example, the time immediately after Eid al-Adha means that meat products won't be sold in shops as readily as they are during the rest of the year, whereas in Algeria, restaurants and pizzerias would not even open for a week or more after the Eid. Other considerations are the financial states of each country. Some markets really lend themselves to those luxury products, and Saudi Arabia springs to mind there. But other countries like Egypt, for example, much more densely populated, more likely to be looking at affordable products and products of a more practical nature. The more flexible you are and the more aware you are, the greater your chances of success. Also understand those cultural and language differences. Even though Arabic is predominant in the region, there are any number of other spoken languages in the region. Farsi and Turkish in the Middle East, and the Amazigh languages in North Africa, far more diverse than one might think up front. And also be aware of referring to every person in the region as being Arabic. It certainly isn't the case, and some people might actually be offended if you refer to them as such. You cannot consider doing business in the MENA region without taking into account the importance of the Islamic religion. The MENA region consists of majority Muslim countries, and you can see them listed there, and almost every aspect of life in the region is influenced by religion in one form or another. It's important when you think of business hours, it's important when you think of setting meetings, attending trade fairs, employing staff, etc. But you also need to take into account that many countries have sizable Christian populations, Lebanon and Egypt among them, and Israel, of course, is predominantly Jewish. When we do take into account the Islamic religion, it's important to understand some of the norms, some of the influences, and the cultural nuances of the languages. And that is important to take into account when you are planning your marketing material, your advertising campaigns, etc. You cannot do things the same way that you would do them right here at home. And if you do them correctly, you will build long-term relationships. Also important to think about time and timing, whether you're setting a business meeting, employing staff, managing operations. Knowing how time flows in the region will help you to navigate more effectively. Religious rituals definitely affect the flow of time in MENA, and among these are the 5 daily prayers that a Muslim must perform. But there are also things that would influence the days of the week that business is conducted, whether a weekend is Friday and Saturday, or a weekend is Saturday and Sunday, or indeed Thursday and Friday. Of course, there are also the major religious festivals, events, and observances, of which the sacred month of Ramadan is key. You need to take that into account because it is going to change the flow of business that you do in the region. When it comes to religious holidays, there are any number that you need to take into account. 2 main holidays in the Muslim world. One is called Eid al-Fitr and the other is Eid al-Adha. And there are various conventions around those two. But of course, in Israel, you need to take into account the major Jewish high holy days and festivals, including solemn religious commemorations like Yom Kippur and Passover, and more festive occasions like Rosh Hashanah. And then there are the major Christian holidays with which to contend as well, just for good measure, including Easter, which isn't the same for the Orthodox and non-Orthodox Christians, and of course, Christmas, and any number in between. In the region, you're going to build bonds first, and then you are going to do business. It's very important to be patient and to understand that bonds are essential, not just for their own sake, but very much a contributing factor to long-term success in the region. In Australia, of course, we think time is of the essence. Pragmatism is valued. We like to get straight down to the nuts and bolts of business, not necessarily the same priorities in the MENA region. If you want to conduct business, you have to focus on building those bonds and earning the trust of the people with whom you are dealing. Kassem has already pointed out the importance of face-to-face meetings, and as the world is shifting back to normality and more travel is enabled, this is becoming crucial yet again. It's all fine and well to exchange emails, to do things via Zoom, but if you want to really do business, you are going to have to look your customer or your potential customer in the eye. If you are having those business meetings, particularly the exploratory ones, don't rush straight into doing business. Find out about the person that you are dealing with, because that is really valued in the region as well. You need to develop your storytelling skills. And a case that I always love to share is a Victorian company that is based out of Kangaroo Flat. And they tell with great glee the story of going to a business meeting in Saudi Arabia and having an interpreter. And they were asked where they were from, and they said they were from Kangaroo Flat. And there was a stunned silence. And then everybody laughed a little bit nervously. And then there was raucous laughter. And when he found out from the interpreter what had been said, the interpreter said that he explained that he was a squashed kangaroo. And of course, that broke the ice. And after then, everybody was friends going forward in that particular environment. So let's look now at some examples of import regulations in some of the markets. Now, we can't possibly cover them all in the time that we have available today, but just some of those key markets, starting off with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia prohibits the import of a large number of goods into the country. And the list of banned goods includes the things you would expect, like pornography, alcohol, also pork, but also Jewish and Christian religious symbols, gambling equipment, and the like. And then there are various hazardous materials and gems. If you do not check what is allowed and you get an order for something without making sure that it is allowed into the country, it will simply be destroyed when it arrives at the border. You need special documentation and clearance for restricted goods, not forbidden goods. Those are forbidden, but for certain restricted goods, which include certain books, cosmetics, computer games, and the like. And those goods also require certificates of conformity. It can take quite a while to get those certificates, so make sure you allow enough time for your shipment. Generally, import taxes and duties for Saudi are low, but there are taxes like ad valorem of 12%, etc. And generally, the tariffs on the majority of imported goods is 5%. The UAE ranks near the top of the ease of doing business list, which is why they're included high in our list today, because of the low tariff rates that they levy on imports and the relative ease of doing business. You must have a valid UAE trade license to import into the UAE. So anyone that you're dealing with, make sure that they have the necessary licenses in order to import the goods that you are selling to them. Lots of agreements in place with many trading partners. Also, a number of prohibited imports, including things like drugs, ivory, printed materials that don't conform with certain values, and goods originating in Israel. And most tariffs 5%, but alcohol 50% and tobacco 100% tariff. Bahrain, a number of supporting documents required, in addition to the usual bills of lading, etc. You'll also need to get the official commercial registration before you can import into the country. So again, make sure that your customer has the right licenses in place, or else they will not be able to import any goods from you. Unlike many other countries in the region, importing businesses in Bahrain may be 100% foreign owned. So if you were to set up there, you would be allowed to import goods in your own right. Just note again those duties: alcohol 125% and tobacco 100%. Qatar, again, import licenses required, and just point out that meat imported into the region requires an additional health certificate and a halal slaughter certificate before the meat will be allowed into the country. Also check, of course, any protocols that may or may not be in existence for Australian exports to any of these countries. Kuwait, again, a long list of prohibited imports. So if you are going to do business with Kuwait, make sure that you check those. And they've also got tariffs, large tariffs on alcohol and tobacco. Lebanon, a number of prohibited goods, again, including goods that bear false origin labels, that violate health measures and threaten the local industry. And that includes things like black cement and cedar seeds, and also nothing that is manufactured in Israel. Allow for singles customs declarations on imported goods, and they also allow direct delivery of imports. Custom duties are generally calculated under a single customs duties, which allows either a 15% proportion value or it's based on a qualitative value. Imports in Egypt are subject to investigation, and companies can be prohibited from shipping goods for 6 months if the data in the registration and the shipping documents is found to be incorrect. Even if it is an accident, you could still face that 6-month ban. There are licenses that are required for goods being imported into Egypt, but generally companies need to be Egyptian nationals, and the stipulations do vary for foreign companies to import into Egypt. Restrictions on a range of goods, and that includes things like beef and beef products, poultry parts, seed potatoes, soybean flour, and medical equipment and supplies. And custom duties on some goods, particularly some household goods, can be up to 40%. Israel has all sorts of controls that need to be met before goods enter the country, and that is regardless of the value and the quantity, and they require the consent of the Israeli government to enter. All imports must have a label that indicates the country of origin, the name, the address of the producer, and a range of other things. You have to include Hebrew. English can be included, but the English language label needs to be smaller than the Hebrew one. And there are specific labeling requirements around auto parts, some consumer goods, fertilizers, alcohol, etc. In Morocco, the Moroccan Ministry of Industry, Investment, Trade, Green and the Digital Economy established a verification of conformity program to certify that imported goods comply with national regulations for product quality and safety. This program came into effect in 2020, so make sure that you comply with all the regulations there. You have to use metric measurements, which isn't a problem for those of us in Australia, but make sure that it's clearly indicated on the labels. And of course, there are any number of restricted items, including things like used clothing, used tires, and rugs similar to those that are produced in the country. Now let's look a little bit closer at what is involved in setting up a business in Saudi Arabia. First of all, the benefits. The economy is worth $700 billion, so Saudi accounts for almost a quarter of all economic activity in the MENA region, and its GDP makes up about half of it. Within that thriving marketplace, there are all manner of industries, from manufacturing and agriculture to pharmaceuticals and services. And of course, with the right support, it is relatively easy to get set up in most of those areas. Saudi Arabia is also home to a growing expat community, and this community, attracted by the nation's vast and open economy, also the supportive company formation procedures and the efficient tax regime. And that expat community in and of itself constitutes a really important consumer market when you are thinking in terms of exporting goods and services into Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has one of the world's lowest crime rates, and it also has one of the world's highest standards of healthcare and education. And again, there are opportunities there. Foreigners doing business in the country also benefit from minimal income and sales tax liability, as well as a great support network, particularly for non-oil related businesses. And it is becoming increasingly easy to do business in Saudi, which is making it increasingly popular. Now, when you are setting up a business in Saudi Arabia, it is important to note that there are some parts of the economy that are open to foreign investment and for setting up businesses, and some parts that are not. So looking at the allowed business activities for foreigners, these are the opportunity sectors, and these are also the allowed sectors: food and beverage production and sales, construction business, the hospitality business, and businesses related to healthcare, and that is across the board from services to goods. Also, tourism. Now, looking at those restricted activities for foreigners, the following sectors are closed to foreigners: oil exploration, drilling and production, goods and services that cater to the military sector, and that is across the board, not just the supply of arms and armaments, but also catering, services, provision of other equipment, etc. Also private security and investigative services, real estate investment, particularly in the Makkah and the Medina, guidance services, so those are tourist guides, and tourism orientation related to the Hajj, recruitment services, and the hunting and fishing of marine resources also closed. Before you start, you do need a business visa to live, work, and to reside in Saudi Arabia. Step one of setting up your business, you need to choose your industry and your business structure, and of course, take into account the allowed and the non-allowed lists. So firstly, you'll need to outline the industry you want to work in and the activities that you intend to undertake. And this will determine whether it's best for you to set up in mainland Saudi or in a free economic zone, and more about the zone later. It will also dictate the type of license and the legal entity that you require. The Ministry of Investment allows registration under the following legal entities. There's the Limited Liability Company, or LLC, and this is the most popular amongst foreign investors. There's also a Limited Liability One-Person Company, a Joint Stock Company, Foreign Company Branch, and a Solidarity Professional Company. From 2023, Saudi Arabia won't issue licenses to foreign companies that don't have a regional headquarter in the country. So that is very important to note if you intend to be setting up a business from the start of next year. If you are setting up a branch company, you need to lease a business premises or you need to work with a local service agent. If you're starting a new company, you can take on mainland premises or you can sign up to a license package in a free economic zone. Step 3 of the process is getting that all-important investment license. So as a foreigner, you will need an investment license, which is issued by the Saudi Arabia General Investment Authority. And when you've got that in your hand, you can invest in the country, you can buy, or you can establish a new country or set up a foreign branch. And you will need to apply for a commercial registration certificate from the Ministry of Commerce and Investment at this stage in the process. And then step 4, some additional documentation that you'll need. You will need another set of documents from the Ministry of Commerce. You need a memorandum of association and your issuance of a commercial registration. And then to confirm the establishment, you also need another list of documents, including proof of ID and address for all the directors and shareholders, passport copies for shareholders and directors, copy of trading name confirmation, memorandum of association, articles of association, and a bank reference letter. So what does it cost to set up? And bear in mind, please, these are rough estimates and guide prices. Kasem alluded to all those hidden costs across the region and of course the costs of doing business generally. So do bear that in mind. But some estimates of costs: submitting that application to MISA and obtaining a license costs around 2,000 Saudi riyals. Publication of the company name and the summary of articles of association in the official gazette, around 5,500 riyals. Registration with the Ministry of Commerce and the Chamber of Commerce, around 8,100 riyals. So when you add that up to register and formalize the company, around 15,600 riyals, which is around 4,000 US dollars by today's exchange rate. But again, bear in mind, rough estimates only. So let's look at the free trade zone now. The integrated logistics bonded zone was launched in April 2021. It's located near the King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh, and the free zone is designed to attract multinational companies working in different parts of the logistics industry. So if you're in that industry, whether it be support services, related industries like warehouse operations, fulfillment centers, maintenance, repairs, inventory management, etc., this is the ideal place for you to set up your operations. Some of the incentives: no restrictions on foreign borrowing, unrestricted repatriation of profits and dividends, complete ownership of all assets, including intellectual property. You can be 100% foreign owned, 0% tax on income earned from normal business activities, relief from withholding tax, no customs and import restrictions, and a 50-year tax exemption. And that includes no VAT. So definitely worth looking into. Now, the one thing that I will leave you with when it comes to setting up a business in Saudi Arabia, or indeed anywhere in the MENA region or anywhere in the world, if you are going to set up an operation in that country, get professional advice. Get yourself a lawyer who understands not just your Australian business, but the market in which you are going to set up. Make sure you get the right advice, because if you do it right at the start, chances are you will continue to do it right throughout. Now, in the time that's left today, I just want to pause on 2 free trade agreements in the region that are under negotiation. The first of which is the Australia Gulf Cooperation Council, FTA. Now, the GCC is a key established market for a range of Australian exports, and that includes agricultural products like live animals, meat, dairy, vegetables, sugar, etc. Also for the automotive and resources exports. There are a number of sectors that are established and a number that are growing in this region. And for that reason, free trade negotiations with the GCC commenced way back in July 2007. There were 4 rounds of negotiations, and then pretty much everything ground to a screeching halt in 2009, until at the GCC Leaders Summit in January last year, the GCC renewed its interest in pursuing an FTA with Australia as a priority market. So discussions have been held again, and if you want to keep track of negotiations, you can see the DFAT web address there that will take you to the page where all the latest information is available. Now, submissions on this FTA have closed, but DFAT is always happy to hear from exporters. So if you do have strong views around this particular FTA, feel free to get in touch and share those views. The next one is the Australia-UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. The UAE is Australia's largest trade and investment partner in the Middle East, and two-way trade of around $6.8 billion. On the 17th of March this year, then Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Dan Tehan, and his Excellency Dr. Thani bin Ahmed Al Saudi, who's the Minister of State for Foreign Trade, issued a joint statement announcing that Australia and the UAE had an intention to pursue a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Again, you can see the address there where you can go for further information. If you do want to know what is happening with this, and if you do have a submission that you would like to make, official submissions closed, but again, unofficial submissions always can be made. So if you have partnerships in the region, if you are trading with the region or thinking of trading and you would like to have a voice in what should be in the negotiations, feel free to contact DFAT and make that voice known. It's always a good thing when we have free trade agreements because it spurs all sorts of activity, and that's also a very positive note for us to end today's session. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, and either I will take them or Kasem, who is the expert on the ground. So you've got a perfect opportunity to ask the expert on the ground any questions that you might have. So feel free to take those, and I'll pass back to you, Kasem.
Thanks, Collins, for this comprehensive presentation. I just want to add a couple of things here. For those businesses that they have service that they provide internationally, it's not required, whether all products, it's not required for Victorian business to set up businesses to enter the market. So there's multiple ways to enter the market, as I have you outlined. So either you partner with a local business to enter the market if you have a service to provide, whether it's professional services or education, or you find an Asian distributor for your products if you want to export. Now, some sectors it requires for you to set up in market, like example, if you are an architect designer company that you want to deliver products in Saudi Arabia, it's a must to have a presence, and you can do it in two ways. Either you set up by yourself, it's time and money consuming, or you do it through with a local business partner. Now, just the landscape, as I mentioned earlier, the landscape of business is changing as well. And we are seeing also in the forthcoming 12 months, there's a lot of taxes coming through the system. So for example, the UAE is implementing 9% corporate taxes starting June 2023. So those businesses who want to set up in the UAE, they need to take this into consideration. Now, we don't provide legal services, but we're more than happy to connect you with the relevant law firm or business consultant to help to set up here. We are seeing also, as I said earlier, the non-tariff barriers is increasing in this part of the world. The cost of registering a label, for example, if you have a bottled water, still water, you want to enter the market, this product here, you have to have what we call Emirates quality marks on the product, and the cost can go up to 30,000 Australian dollars. So you need to be aware of all this to enter the market. There's also excess taxes has been implemented in the market the past 3 years. Those excess taxes, for example, for any added sugar products or maybe energy drinks. So you need to take this in consideration when it comes to my advice is to everyone is to work with a business partner. Come to us first. It's a case by case. We can't generate everything for all the countries. Each country has its own way of doing business, rules and regulation. However, there's a lot of common rules and regulation across the Gulf region. So that's my just the small tips to add here today.
Thanks very much, Kasem. And absolutely, I think, if you take nothing else from today's session, but that you need to get professional advice, starting with the experts with the Victorian state government that you already have as a resource on the ground, and Kasem and his team can point you in the direction of others who can assist you on any number of different areas. Start there, because you don't have to do this alone, and if you try to do it alone, you probably will end up in a world of trouble. So don't spend any money that you don't have to spend, but spend the money that you need to spend wisely, because if you don't spend it up front, you could end up spending a lot more if you get it wrong, and those hidden costs can certainly add up and just make it not viable for you to enter a particular market. And maybe instead of going into one market in MENA, you go into a different one, which might be a little bit easier for you to enter in the first instance. And yes, as Kasem mentioned, you don't have to set up. We used Saudi Arabia as an example of if you do choose to set up in market. And of course, if you're in those sectors like architecture where you have to, but you can just sell from here. You don't have to set up in market unless you choose to. And obviously you'll only do that if you are really going to get entrenched in the area. I think we've stunned them, Kasem. I think everybody's got so much to digest that they can't think of any questions. Feel free, if you do have any questions after today's session, to send them to me via email, and I will pass that on to Kasem and his team. And I will also make sure that you get a copy of today's deck if you'd like it, so you've got all the contact details firsthand. And thank you very much, Herbert. Kasem Herbert writes, thank you for the great insights. I just traveled to 21 countries in 1 hour. So thank you.
Indeed.
And you're most welcome, Herbert. And I feel like I've just guided you through 21 countries in 1 hour. I'll need a little lie down after this, I think.
Yeah.
But it has been great. And Kasem, thank you so much for sharing those insights. And because Kasem and his team are right there, they hear things as they happen. You might never see them make it into the media or any other sources, and you will only discover that things have been announced, new taxes, new tariffs, new rules and regulations when you're trying to enter the market. So find out before you do. And, you've got a resource. And I've always said that we are so fortunate in Victoria to be based here, because the Victorian state government does far more for its exporters than any other state in Australia, and sometimes even the federal government. So we can be very, very fortunate that we've got resources like these. Use them. You won't get the chance to do it more often than not. So please do make the most of it. Well, all that remains then is to say thank you if there aren't any other questions. And I'm sure you'll all virtually join me in raising a hand and clapping for Kasem and his contribution to today's session, which was really great, really insightful, and always interesting to have. And for all those of you who've been with us, not just today, but for the 31 sessions that preceded today, thank you. It's been great having the pleasure of your company, and I look forward to seeing you, if not in this forum, in another one further down the track. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day, and go off and do, as always, some very good business. So goodbye.
Thanks, Collins. Thanks, everyone. All the best.
Thanks. Bye-bye.